All right, so have you ever been looking at Roman art and been like, how did they get those colors?
Yeah, especially those frescoes. They're
Yeah.
so vibrant.
Yeah, like how is that even possible?
And they last so long.
I know, right?
It's amazing.
So that's what we're going to be looking at today.
We're doing a deep dive into how they made those pigments.
Exactly. Like what were they actually using?
Yeah, and how do we know?
Well, I'm seeing this research article about this thing called ER-FTIR.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
External Reflectance Fourier Transform Infrared Spectroscopy.
Yeah, don't worry, we'll break it down.
Yeah, we'll get into it. But basically, it's a way to figure out what the pigments are.
Right, it's a non-invasive way.
Ooh, fancy.
So we can figure out what the pigments are without having to damage the artwork.
So cool.
Yeah, they're using infrared light to analyze the chemical makeup of the pigments.
So it's like shining a special light on it
Exactly.
and seeing what bounces back.
Yeah, and each pigment has its own kind of unique signature. So it's like a fingerprint.
Yep, like a fingerprint for each color.
That's amazing. And this study looked at red and yellow pigments, right?
Yes, those were some of the most common colors in Roman art.
Okay, so like Roman reds, what are we talking about here?
Well, there's hematite.
Okay.
You know that really famous cave painting, the Lascaux Bulls?
Uh-huh.
The red in that is hematite.
Oh.
People have been using this pigment for a really, really long time.
So like the Romans would have used it too?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
It's really available, easy to find, and it lasts a really long time.
So it's like the go-to.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cool. What other reds did they use?
There's red ochre, which is like iron oxide with some other stuff mixed in.
So like more earthy?
Yeah, kind of like hematite's more down-to-earth cousin, you know?
Okay.
And then you've got burnt sienna.
Okay.
So it actually starts as a yellow pigment called raw sienna.
Uh-huh.
But when you heat it up, it turns this like reddish brown color.
Oh, cool. So
Right.
they had to like process it. Exactly. And the Romans actually developed some specific ways to prepare it.
Wow, so they really knew their stuff.
Yeah, they knew their pigments.
It's not just like grabbing some dirt and slapping it on the wall.
No, it's real chemistry going on here.
That's so interesting. Okay, what else?
Well, there's vermilion.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a really bright red made from mercuric sulfide.
Oh, that sounds kind of complicated.
It was, and actually it was pretty expensive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so if you had vermilion in your house, it was a sign that you were pretty wealthy.
So it was like a status symbol.
Definitely.
Interesting. Isn't vermilion like toxic though?
Yeah, it is, but the Romans didn't really know that back then.
Oh, wow.
They knew it was a little tricky to work with, but they didn't really understand how toxic it could be.
It makes you think, what are we using today that will be like, whoops, about in the future?
Right, yeah.
So what's the last red pigment?
Minium.
Okay.
It's a lead oxide, and it creates this bright orange-red color.
Lead. Yeah, that doesn't sound safe either.
Not really, no.
Wow, the Romans were using some pretty intense stuff.
They loved their colors.
I guess so. Okay, so we've covered the reds. What about yellows?
We've got goethite,
Okay.
that gives you those earthy golden yellows like you see in nature.
Oh, is it?
Yellow ochre, which is similar to red ochre.
Right, iron oxide and clay.
Mm-hmm. And then we've got raw sienna, which
Yeah.
we talked about.
Yeah, the one turns into burnt sienna.
Exactly.
So it seems like a lot of these yellows are just different forms of iron oxide.
Yeah, it's amazing all the colors you can get just from iron oxide.
That's pretty cool.
But there's one yellow that's a little different.
Oh, which one?
Orpiment.
Okay, that one sounds a little more exotic.
It is. It's made from arsenic sulfide.
Arsenic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's even worse than lead.
Yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to handle this one without gloves.
So are you telling me the Romans were just casually using arsenic in their art?
Pretty much. It creates this really vibrant, almost lemon yellow color.
I guess they really weren't afraid of anything.
Nope.
Okay, so back to this ER-FTIR thing.
Yeah.
How do they actually use it to tell what's in the fresco?
Okay, so remember how we talked about each pigment having a unique fingerprint?
Yeah.
Well, it all comes down to how the light interacts with the pigment.
Okay.
Different pigments absorb different frequencies of infrared light,
All right.
and that creates a unique pattern in the light that bounces back.
So it's like a code.
Kinda, yeah, like a barcode at the grocery store.
Each one's unique.
Exactly. And the researchers, they analyzed a bunch of pure pigment samples,
Okay.
and they created a library of these patterns.
So they have like a database of all the pigment fingerprints.
Pretty much.
That's smart.
And then when they analyze a fresco, they can compare the pattern they see to the library.
Oh, so they can match it up and be like, aha, That's hematite.
Exactly.
That's so cool. But frescoes aren't exactly like smooth surfaces, are they?
No, they're not.
I bet that makes it a little trickier.
Yeah, it definitely adds some challenges. It does. I mean, think about it.
Okay.
They're mixing these pigments with, like, binders.
Right.
And then putting them on these rough walls.
So it's not just a pure sample of the pigment.
Exactly.
There's all this other stuff mixed in.
Mm-hmm. So it's not as straightforward.
So how do they deal with that? Do they just like try to ignore all that extra stuff?
Well, they try to filter it out, but they also do something really clever.
Oh, what's that?
They create these mock-up frescoes.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Like fake frescoes?
Basically.
How do they do that?
They take the pigments, mix them with the binder,
Okay.
just like the Romans would have done,
Oh.
and then they apply them to a surface that's similar to a real fresco.
So they're basically recreating the conditions.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. So what did they learn from doing that?
Well, for one thing, they found that the binder itself, it shows up in the readings.
So it adds its own signals.
Yeah, but by studying the mock-ups, they were able to figure out which signals came from the binder.
And which ones came from the actual pigment.
Exactly.
So it's like being able to tell the different instruments apart in a song.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Cool. Did they learn anything else from the mock-ups?
They did. The rough surface, it actually affects the readings, too.
Really? In what way?
So you remember how we talked about those combination and overtone bands?
Those are like the weaker signals?
Yeah, like the fainter echoes of the main signal.
Okay.
Well, because of the rough surface, those fainter signals actually get amplified.
Oh, wow. So they become easier to see.
Exactly.
Interesting. So it seems like the rough surface is actually helpful in a way.
It is. It gives us even more information about the pigments.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So did they actually use all of this on real Roman frescoes?
They did. They analyzed some fresco fragments from a site in Cremona, Italy.
Oh, wow.
These were from two domus, which were basically like Roman houses,
Okay.
and they date back to the time of Augustus.
Wow. So we're talking about the real deal here.
Yeah.
What did they find?
Well, they were able to identify hematite, vermilion,
Okay.
and goethite.
So it worked. They could actually tell which pigments were in these ancient frescoes.
Exactly.
That's so amazing. So these fragments, they must have some pretty cool stories to tell.
They do. For example, remember how we said vermilion was a sign of wealth?
Yeah, it was expensive.
Well, they found vermilion in one of the fragments from Cremona.
So the people who lived there must have been pretty well off.
That's what it seems like.
Wow, that's fascinating. What else did they find?
There was one fragment that was particularly interesting.
Oh, what was so special about it?
They found both hematite and vermilion in it.
In the same fragment?
Yeah, but they were layered.
Like one on top of the other?
Yeah, they think the artist may have applied a layer of hematite first
Okay.
and then covered it with a thinner layer of vermilion.
Oh, interesting. So why do you think they would do that?
Well, remember, vermilion was way more expensive.
Right.
So by using hematite as a base layer, they could save a bit of money.
That's clever. So they were being both artistic and practical.
Exactly.
Wow, it's amazing how much we can learn from just a few fragments,
I know. It's like each one is a little time capsule.
giving us a glimpse into the past.
Yeah.
But how do we know for sure that these pigments are actually Roman?
That's a great question.
Yeah, like what if someone just like touched them up later on?
Well, that's a big part of what they wanted to figure out, making sure the pigments they were looking at were really from the Roman period.
Right, they had to make sure it wasn't a fake.
Exactly.
So how did they do that?
They didn't just use the ER-FTIR, they actually used a bunch of different techniques.
Oh, wow. So it was like a whole team effort.
Yeah, it's like a CSI team for art.
I love that.
Yeah.
Art CSI.
Right.
Okay, so what other techniques did they use?
Well, they used Raman spectroscopy,
Okay.
which uses light too, but in a slightly different way. It gives you an even closer look at the molecules.
So it's like a super-powered fingerprint analysis.
Yeah, kind of.
That's cool. What else?
They also used X-ray fluorescence,
Okay.
or XRF,
Catchy.
which uses X-rays to look at the elements in the pigments.
The element.
Yeah, like the basic building blocks.
So they could tell exactly what the pigment was made of.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, what was the last technique?
X-ray powder diffraction.
Okay, I'm sensing a theme here with the X-rays.
Right.
What does that one do?
So imagine each pigment is like a tiny crystal
Okay, I'm imagining it.
with a very specific arrangement of atoms.
Uh-huh.
XRD lets us see that arrangement.
So we can see how the atoms are put together.
Exactly. It's like getting a blueprint of the pigment.
That's incredible. So they used all of these techniques
Uh-huh.
to basically double, triple, quadruple check that the pigments were authentic.
Exactly.
Wow, they really went all out.
They did. And it paid off because they were able to say with certainty that these colors were the ones the Romans used.
That's so cool. It's amazing how much work goes into figuring all of this out.
It is. It's really like a combination of history, science, and art.
Yeah, you need all of those things to solve these mysteries.
Definitely. And it just goes to show how important it is to have people from different fields working together.
I agree. It's like one person couldn't do all of this on their own.
No way.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've learned so much about the pigments the Romans used
And the techniques they used to apply them.
and the amazing science that's letting us uncover all of these secrets.
It really makes you appreciate the artistry and ingenuity of the Roman people.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder what other secrets are still out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Who knows what we'll be able to learn in the future with new technologies and new discoveries.
That's what's so exciting about this field. There's always something new to learn.
I know. And for everyone listening, if you're as fascinated by Roman art and science as we are,
We encourage you to check out the article we talked about today.
it's a great starting point for learning more about this stuff.
And who knows, maybe it will inspire you to go see some of these Roman frescoes in person.
Yeah. You can actually see the fragments we talked about today at the Archaeological Museum San Lorenzo in Cremona.
It would be amazing to see those colors in real life.
I know. It's like a direct connection to the past.
It really is.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
But we hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
And until next time, keep exploring and keep those minds curious.